Is Jesus being the good shepherd and you hearing his voice above the voice of that inner critic? Adam and Eve, we go back to the very beginning of our story as human beings. Adam and Eve, they heard that voice. They should have been listening to the voice of God, that after he created them, he said it is very good. Right? Everything else that he created was just good, but then he creates Adam and Eve and he says all of a sudden now it's very good. You are very good. But is that what they listen to? No, they hear it's very good and they say, thanks God for the compliment. But we don't think so. We don't think we're good enough yet. We think we're missing something. We think you're keeping something from us. And so what does that end up leading them to do? They end up harvesting. They end up working where they shouldn't have been working, harvesting where they shouldn't have been harvesting, taking fruit from the tree that God says, you don't need that. You're good enough just the way that you are. But because they didn't trust, because their identity wasn't wrapped up in their relationship with God, all of a sudden their relationship with him broke. All of a sudden now they feel guilt and feel shame. And how do they respond? They hide and then they work. They work to cover up their shame. They work to cover up their nakedness. They sew fig leaves together. But nothing will cover up that voice that says you're not good enough, that you're dirty, that you're naked. And so God says, put the fig leaves away, and he sheds blood, and he covers them with the skins of animals, pointing to the future day when Jesus would come and lay down his life and to shed his blood so that we could be found in him, so that we could be clothed in his righteousness. So that when we are baptized, you know what happens? We unite ourselves with Christ, we clothe ourselves with Christ, and all of a sudden now our identity is not wrapped up in our accomplishments. It's not wrapped up in how much money we make or the titles that we have next to our name. It's wrapped up in what Jesus has done for us on the cross. And when we're baptized, we unite ourselves with Christ in his death, burial, and resurrection. And on that day, we get to hear the voice of God say the exact same that his heavenly Father said to him when he was baptized. What did God say to his son when he was baptized? Do you remember? He says, you are my son. You are my son whom I love. With you I am well pleased. With you I am well pleased. Now, Jesus hadn't fed crowds yet. He hadn't spoken to thousands of people. He was just at the beginning of his ministry. But he said, I love you just the way you are. And he says that same thing that is true of us. When we surrender our life to Christ, he says, I love you. You are my son. You are my daughter whom I love. With you I am well pleased, not because of anything you have done, but because of what my son Jesus has done for you on the cross. Are we listening to that voice?